Pertwee fell out the TARDIS doors, the entire show changed around him, really testing the mettle of this show's inherent need to change. And the 70s brought about the biggest change in the show's history. Colour, capes, good old-fashioned British imperialism, and a change in tone, and a change in genre. By 71, a survey revealed that 70% of the viewership were actually adults. Doctor Who was becoming a cult TV programme. A strict doctor, new military surroundings, and a later time slot certainly secured the change in identity that I think Doctor Who needed. Think what a gamble this drastic change in format was. You take away his friends and the police box and all of his old adversaries, what you have? Well, that's just it. I'm still not sure. For a short period of time, Doctor Who just became a different show. The third incarnation might just be the most unusual. He's a man of contradictions. On one hand, a stern respect for military authority. On the other, a bohemian runaway. The disdain for humans, whilst clearly exhibiting those same petty human behaviours. He's a frustrating one to pin down, but a hell of a blast to watch on screen. Even if he does culturally appropriate Venusian culture. Cancelled. No, the only real consistency to 3 is the personality of one John Pertwee himself. From every interview account and quote, I can only see the actor and the character as one and the same. When taking the role, Pertwee was told to play the Doctor as himself. And reportedly, he found himself through playing the Doctor. Apart from the need to be the most important man in the room, I don't think Navy man Pertwee and Doctor Who have much in common. Take that, you amphibious bastard! And yet he still managed to make the role his own. As he is undoubtedly one of the most iconic and scene-stealing Doctors to ever grace the screen. What we do have is a Doctor who openly contradicts his own character, serial to serial. Which makes my job a bit of a nightmare. 3 is proud and temperamental. He's big-headed and mythological. And he really just decides to embrace an old-school archetypal hero role. Which, is different. When pushed out of his comfort zone, you get the real interesting stuff from the Third Doctor. Pertwee's screen presence is commanding, his style is fine, and his rare moments of vulnerability, frustration and weakness are his very best. And because the Doctor is such a proper gentleman and does not talk about his feelings or vent his frustrations, I feel like sometimes we're cheated out of some crucial character development. For example, the best Third Doctor story for character is Walls of Confinement. A short trip where we learn the Doctor empathises deeply with the local zoo tiger. An exotic, beautiful creature driven mad by its own enclosure. And it's just a little nugget of characterization like that this era could have done so much more with. But man, what an era of very strange contradictions. A comedy actor playing a very serious archetypal hero. A stiff upper lip cast with some of the most politically overt stories of all time. An often bigoted Doctor with notoriously feminist companions. Ooh, the times are a-changin'. Oh, also, these stories are all solid, honestly. Perhaps the most consistently good writing in the show's history. Which, of course, brings about a big problem, why I wrestle with my own format and have to resort to finding 5 bad Pertwee stories. I'm not sure there are 5 bad Pertwee stories. So instead, let's bash on a number of average to good fan favourites that just failed to connect with me personally. This is going to go down well. Next on BBC One, Doctor Who faces against the fearsome Ambassadors of Death. I really wanted to like this one, but I can say with great confidence it just failed to keep my attention. Millennials, right? No, maybe it was because it was elongated for budgetary reasons, fiddled with to the point of frenzy, and way overhyped by the fandom at large, when really, it's a story written around a single chroma key effect, and it had all of its enthusiasm and character sucked out. Mostly because that's exactly what happened with David Whittaker's original script, which couldn't be fixed to fit the series' new tone. I say, if that tone is bone dry and procedural, count me out. What this story is crying out for is a burst of 1960s cheese, silliness and optimism. This might be Doctor Who's coldest story, it's just not for me. Mostly because it's a bunch of government officials actually doing their very important work. What really stings though is that the serial before and after this got to have their share of fun, pulpy moments. And considering some of the visuals and the rather cutesy finale, I don't think this was the ultra-atmospheric story that everybody makes it out to be. My god, let the man make his silly Scooby-Doo script. What most people describe as cold atmospheric creepiness, I just see as awkwardness. I think this is a very awkward story, and that's because it's so uncharged emotionally. Because there's no passion, none of the characters seem to care about what it is they're doing. The Doctor ends this episode by just sort of walking off frame. Whatever, it's a day job. The cliffhangers are weak, most of the episodes are blatant padding. But I don't know, it's admirable, isn't it? I like it when the show tries something drastically different, but you can't like them all. That's what an experiment's for. Number 2, Rise of the New Humans. Yes, there are Third Doctor audios out there. Thank you, Big Finish, I needed them in fact, otherwise I would never have found 5 bad stories. I'd have to end up bashing, Inferno or something, and that'd be to nobody's benefit. They're a real interesting mixed bunch that I'll have to cover in the future, but this story is just wildly something else. A true, rare, earned dislike. Imagine a story about the greater good that has the Doctor of all people delivering the most villainous and self-justifying monologue in it. And then the story expects you to agree with him. This is one loud, tacky story as is, from the pompous villain to Rufus Hound's audio moustache, bristling me from my own speakers. But let's cut to Part 3's lecture from the Doctor about disease actually having its uses.
But when you consider the lives it could save...
My dear, disease and death have their benefits.
Benefits?
You are living on a planet that is already exhausting its resources. Overpopulation is making the problem worse day by day. Space is limited, Dr. Curdy. Practicality will only get you so far. Are the oceans to be the new ghettos, where the workers are forced to live with their unsightly gills?
You're theorizing absurdly.
I'm thinking the problem through, fully, which you should have done years ago.
You are hearing correctly. A greater good, culling, excusing speech about interfering with time from the very character who ran away from such callous big-picture arguments to do nothing but interfere with time. There's a reason that other stories on the matter submit to the moral good and shrug off such familiar, evil rhetoric used by politicians in the real world all too often. And it's especially uncomfortable when the recipient of said Thanos speech is a female genius minority scientist whose life has clearly been run by similar pompous men in her field, also talking down to her. Mike Yates, more like, yikes mate. Sorry, that was bad. Spoiler, I hate it. It's going all so good until Part 2. A Pertwee impressionist who actually delivers real heart and soul into his performance. Lovely Joan 3 dialogue. Cutesy audioscape that makes me feel like I've been transported back to the 1970s. An era I was not actually alive in. But the bizarre Part 1 cliffhanger just takes a turn for the aggressively obnoxious. With the surprise reveal that the Institute isn't being run by the Master, but the meddling monk. The ever-smug, annoyingly pantomime, meddling monk. Why? The monk's very presence in a story relegates the Doctor to a different moral position. Now, the Doctor has to pretend he's never interfered with time when that's the very thing his entire character hinges upon. He's a character that really summons the Doctor at his most self-righteous. And the story never actually does resolve what makes the monk so different to the Doctor. One is nice, but one is greedy. The Doctor decides the rules because he's clever, is genuinely the takeaway this episode wants you to have. And that's why the monk is a foundationally terrible character, who I hope stays buried. This story fails when the Doctor's instant moral authority is supposed to make others into villains, because he said so. It's important because this show has always been very, very responsible. When sci-fi really misses the mark, in that era you find a real type of person, nested deep. The types who shelter in these eras. The type who have somehow missed the 56-year-long message of kindness and progressive good. that preceded it. And the less said about those types, the better. Number 3. I also disapprove of the mutants. More so for pure entertainment purposes. The 6-parters of the Pertwee era are strange. Always seemingly given to the wrong stories and eventually veer off into monotony or fun lunacy. This one does both. Some fly by whilst others drag. This one drags. The Bizarro Apartheid story is definitely the latter. 75 minutes without urgency, monsters or flair. And then suddenly, this happens. It's revealing that the sudden introduction of a glowing flying butterfly glam man is all it takes to wake me up. The lack of enthusiasm also apparently spreads to the production, with a director not even wanting to claim it, and the sci-fi purposely trying to dilute the real-world segregation commentary rather than enhance it. Visually, the cave sections look fantastically psychedelic, which makes it all the more a shame when we return to the overlit white ship that takes up most of the runtime. Oh, even that's fine. I'm probably being way too hard on it. I'll come back in a couple years and I bet I'll love it, is the thing. It's more the production side of this one that I disagree with. Why take out political commentary? Man, you are sci-fi. It's just below the high standards of the Pertwee era, but at least the effects and the imagination are motivated in an otherwise largely unmotivated story. We'd be getting many indistinguishable stories like this in the years ahead, some of them written by Bob Baker himself, but such an entry in this era sticks out like a sore thumb. The Mutants is sci-fi that tries to sabotage itself of any greater meaning. Doctor Who and the Time Monster! Okay, here's what I mean by there being almost no truly bad 3 stories. This much bullied story is not a great episode, but god is it a lot of fun. Once you learn to accept the goofy serial lameness of actual Atlantis existing, this might be one of the most watchable stories in the classic series. Even if not for the right reasons. All of the truest staple elements of the Pertwee era are here. A great cast, terrible hair, great monster designs wonkily realised, and fun batshit action shot in all of the wrong ways. It speaks volumes that a story with this, and this. It's Delgado who memorably and sexily steals the show with some of his best material and versatility. For a large part of the Time Monster, he even feels like the main character. It's his story. His ridiculous, Benson Baby Atlantis adventure story. Writer Robert Sloman will in fact curiously tell you it's a very complex story about interstitial time and the philosophical Gaia theory. But I can confirm that it is actually a big dumb action story that decides, fuck it, let's go Atlantis. Exactly 0 of these intellectual high concept ideas make it to screen. Kronos? Of course! I should have known! Doctor, you literally entered the plot 10 seconds ago. How could you have known it was a temporal time eagle from Atlantis? Guys, you can bully the story all you like, but at least it actually feels its 6-episode runtime. It's likeable nonsense. I'm glad it allows the team to have fun. I'm happy it allows the master to shine. But there's points for this story just feels like it's fucking with you. What you got there, Doc? Doctor Who and the hot take. Oh god, this is... I didn't like the demons. And honestly, consider me surprised. Location filming and black magic? You think this one was made for me? Now, as a kid, I was mesmerised by the final episode of this. It was on the VHS Pertwee years, so although I only saw the others very recently, Azal and that dreaded evil maypole are burned into my brain. So you will give your power to me. Sadly, it feels like 5 episodes of wasting to actually get there. Pertwee serials, even the most average of stories, usually turn it around with a phenomenal finale. Spearhead, Sea Devils, Day of the Daleks... Frontier in Space's final moments deliver some of the greatest iconic moments in all Who. But the Demon seems to be only remembered for its final episode, curtly ignoring the 4 episodes of frustrated phone tag it took to get here. Somehow the story is A, not good, and B, incredibly iconic. I don't know how the Third Doctor era does that. To be honest, I think I'd see this cast of characters do anything. I'd watch them save a cat from a tree.
The wings there. 5 rounds left.
Can we please bring back the chap with the wings? He is my favourite Doctor Who villain now. But again, all of these iconic moments and quotes are in the final 10 minutes. Yeah, when the Brigadier says the thing, he's the best. But for the rest of the runtime, he's behind a desk. Until then, we have the worst supporting cast I've seen in a Who episode. The Master's stuck in the basement because even the show is bored of him at this point. And this guy, who I think I like. Yeah, he's cool. Blah. The demons are also responsible for the wheel, fire, and the industrial era, along with 3 other Doctor Who monsters. They all chipped in. Fittingly, this was Pertwee's favourite story. Which adds up. The Doctor is very centre stage, with forces nobody else can comprehend. 3's at his most self-satisfied and lecturing here also. Respect the Brigadier's military authority. He is your superior. It's a far cry from the Doctor a mere season ago, when the Silurians were blown up, or any incarnation ever. Not even the War Doctor would deliver such dialogue. And there's no Earthbound excuse that covers it, by the way. Where does the Brigadier's authority lead? Bullets, and an effect cheaply lifted from a Bond film. Sorry guys, this one's lame. When the show misses, it feels like state propaganda without a specific instilling message. I do insist that Pertwee's best stories are ones that allow him to be humble, affectionate, and occasionally wrong. There's none of that in this pantomime, just a bunch of men, hero and villain alike, standing around shouting the word superior. Those very flaws of the Pertwee Doctor are part of what make Curse of Peladon such a strong breath of fresh air. Notably, I first read this story rather than watched it. A really ambitious alien story set within a fun creature feature of an intergalactic peace summit. A story so bold and colourful I thought, the budget won't be up to this. And I was completely wrong. This story looks great. After so many years bunged up on Earth, the Savage Peladon is beautifully realised, with a great open mystery premise and allegory aplenty. It was about page 9 where I realised we had a 1972 pro-EU metaphor on our hands. Don't tell your Auntie Whittaker mate about this one, because there's no attempt even made at subtlety. I think what's great here on a plot level is that for once we as an audience are one step ahead of the Doctor. The royal advisor, Hapesh, is outed very early as the conspiring villain of the piece, allowing us to see the bigger picture of a story than get sucked into a mystery with obvious twists. No, instead we get to see the Doctor finally capable of fault, missing their destination, lured into Hapesh's many traps, and wrongfully accusing the Ice Warriors as the perpetrators, when in fact they make for great surprise allies, making both Islir and the Doctor more nuanced characters in the misunderstanding. It even has the series' first, and maybe only, good combat scene. The Action Doctor wasn't especially known for his expert fight choreography, but against the odds, the BBC managed an atmospheric and in-character gladiator fight. And I think it holds up now. Jeffrey Toombs' Hapesh is a brilliantly intelligent villain. There's a great scene where the Doctor just stops and registers him and realises he's a real tricky threat. That kind of respect makes him actually memorable as one of my favourites, and he's also a very familiar evil. Now, the EU Galactic Federation comparison, it's not actually one-to-one. 1970s Britain might have been rough, but it wasn't the medieval Peladon. And there's a really quite nuanced portrayal of religion being twisted that was way ahead of its time. Some Doctor Who stories are only just daring to do that now. But I think the serial really takes time to reasonably explain both concerns on both sides, before the show sails into the rather mature belief that extreme nationalism breeds wannabe dictators, and tradition for tradition's sake is backwards. I unsurprisingly love this story. Even Alpha Centauri's a cutie, severely underrated. And in this corner, the ageless campy wonder. It's Carney of Monsters, an absolute childhood favourite. Did I mention that 3 was a strong childhood fave? In between 3, 5 and 10 I had a lot of different idols growing up. A story that uses its inbuilt 70s gaudiness to its actual advantage. If it wasn't for the bizarre opening 10 minutes, a packaging sequence that never seems to end, I'd actually recommend this as the introductory story to classic Who. It's such a bright and brilliant return to the imaginative zaniness of the wackier 60s stories. As ever, Robert Holmes brings his A-game in a story that doesn't waste a moment or lose your attention once, injecting alien worlds, monsters, politics, technology and ethics into a literal microcosm. The cliffhangers are also back on top form as Doctor Who and the Deadly Drashigs, and Doctor Who and the Accursed Hand still stick in my mind and my childhood nightmares. It's just one of those perfect bits of writing that has Who written all over it. It could star any Doctor and appear in any season. Quintessential Who. It's so unique I wouldn't change anything about it, and it's exactly the invigorating change of pace that this Doctor ordered. Day of the Daleks. I feel like I'm going to get booed out of the room for this one, but the special edition of Day of the Daleks honest to God salvages this disfavoured story and turns it into one of the most fun Dalek outings ever. We agreed? Because contrary to belief, I actually don't enjoy being contrarian. It leads to various men called Keith popping up in my inbox to tell me I'm a smug millennial with no attention span. But ironically, that's one of the things I love about this serial. It moves like a revival-era sci-fi adventure. The Daleks staging an attack on their leader meeting in the past to ensure their timeline is just a great concept. 13 years before Terminator. The stakes and the scale of this one just feel huge. This could have been a Doctor Who movie if its budget had been quadrupled. Rather adorably, the Radio Times listing for this read, "See Pertwee fight Daleks, Ogrons, and ride a tricycle," which just makes me adore this era even more. Because he absolutely does. He does ride a tricycle. Name one other Doctor that can pull this off. Episode 4 is a joy. It's for Brigadier vs Daleks. What more do you want? This is also a studio-based story that just looks phenomenal. Brilliant blocking and staging, directional round. But the story aside, it's fair to say this episode had some glaring production flaws, and the special edition helps it out a lot. I'd call the original one of the greatest bad stories ever made, but apparently all it took was a lick of paint to really shine itself up. Some fancy city shots, Briggs's dulcet Dalek tones. Man, there's a lot to love here, and if you haven't seen it recently, I urge you to dig it out. Number 4, I got stuck. I really deliberated on this video and could not choose between Spearhead from Space and Terror of the Autons. Life in Plastic, it is fantastic, and both of these have so many, show firsts that they should both be celebrated. And too often, I find that people like one much more than the other. Both are incredibly intense, still quite scary to this day, making massive changes in location, and new additions to the cast. In their introduction, I don't know who steals the show more, Katie Manning or Delgado. Oh god, we haven't talked about Katie Manning or Roger Delgado yet! Did you mean the two actors who made this era iconic? Because they're definitely the best two things in it. There are few companions with as much growth and development as one Miss Grant. And frankly, there's no master like Delgado. Without Delgado, there is no master. But for time, I will say their presence makes Terror of the Autons my Auton story. My personal sleep paralysis demon. From beginning to end, it is a scary, unnatural bit of television. And it was so good that it set up an entire template for the era. But the final moments of Spearhead from Space, part 4 is amazing. And number 5, The Time Warrior. From this point, I start struggling. So many classics, so little time. But I would be amiss to miss out on The Time Warrior. This is the Sontarans at their best, Sarah Jane at her brightest, and 3 at his most charming. By the end of his run, Pertwee really ironed out the character, and late Pertwee is the best Doctor. I always say that though. Every criticism I've levelled so far is in this story, but suddenly, it works. 70s Who was absolutely cheated out of historical stories. Holmes hated doing them. When told not to neglect a key part of the series' premise any longer, he decided to invent the new Who formula a couple of decades early. I have no clue how Lynx, a character that looks like this, is such a cool customer of a character, and that design is still one of the few that really holds up, by the way. But I love the way he reacts to a rough slap on the back, or discovering another sex, and is childishly disappointed with Irongrun's failure to siege a castle. He's just a villain that has been properly thought out, and with such fun, Green Blazer style, action, and real comedy, the day is saved by Who at its very best. When it managed to deliver its multifaceted appeal all in one package, Doctor Who is at its best. The revival fashioned itself off of only the best, and this is definitely that. It's going to be a good while until I tackle the final 2 Doctors, so in the meantime, let me know the kind of Who content you want me to tackle. Thank you for watching.